Well, hello and welcome to Inside Cottonwood. I'm your host today, Mayor Tim Elinski. And on today's program, I'm very delighted to have virtually with us today Mr. Peter Flynn from the Verde Valley Homeless Coalition. Peter, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks so much for taking the time out of your day. How are you doing? Yeah. So I know you've been running the circuit here for several weeks, talking about some of the exciting opportunities that are coming up for the Verde Valley Homeless Coalition, of which you are our board chair. But before we get into that, even though I've served with you on the Verde Valley Homeless Coalition board for a while now, I've actually never gotten a chance to sit down with you one-on-one and just get to know you a little bit better. So I'm going to take that opportunity now, Peter, just to learn a little bit more about how you came to be in Arizona. I know you're a native of Canada, but how if you could just give us a little bit of a brief intro into who Peter Flynn is and how you got here, and then we'll talk a little bit about your involvement with the coalition. So go ahead, sir.
Well, actually, I'm a native of the U.S. that went to graduate school in Canada. And at the time, the Canadian oil industry was booming, and I married a person from Canada, and that's the surefire way to stay in a different place. It's a standard motivator to stay put. I had a wonderful career for 25 years, and I pretty early got into management, so I ended up running a couple of companies that were owned by larger companies. It wasn't that I'd founded them, but a strong background in management. And then in my 50s, I went back to the University of Alberta to become a professor teaching management to engineers. And that was the last 12 years of my working life. I had wonderful research programs with grad students. And along the way, I got involved in some nonprofit work, including serving on the board of a low-income subsidized housing entity. It was a management entity that looked after units where the federal, state, and local governments had all been involved. So we managed 5,500 units of low-income housing, and built 400 new units when I was on that board. My nickname on the board was Doors, 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 because I kept focusing on get more, get more, get more.
Now, Peter, was this up in Alberta or was this in the States?
Yes, yeah, this was in Alberta. This was in Edmonton, Alberta. Then I retired, and I had been exposed to the wonders of the Verde Valley and in particular Sedona 23 years earlier. My wife had been exposed 1 year earlier, and so we were driving through Sedona on our way back over the Christmas holidays, and I said, let's just look at the property. And by the end of the day, we had bought a lot, we built a house, and so we are now fully committed. But we still have 6 grandkids in Edmonton, so that's where I am now. So we are snowbirds, but quite active. Actually, more active now in Arizona in terms of nonprofit work. So.
All right, so the Red Rock Fever is what brought you here, huh?
Oh, absolutely. We are the classic Red Rock Fever. One day, and at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I looked at my wife and said, we got to buy this. Yeah. And it happened to be right at the peak, but that's the kids' problem, not ours.
Very good. So you've been here you said it was at the peak. Do you mean 06, 07 in that time
yes,
range?
Yes, in fact, exactly then. So we built a house, and we've been in the house now for 10 years.
Okay, great. And so then, go ahead.
There's a lovely couple that ran a charitable wine auction that wanted to use our house as the venue, which we agreed. And the first year we gave the money to a food bank. But the second year I said, let's give it for homeless, because I had a background in housing. And I didn't want to give it to homeless in where I lived. I wanted to give it in Cottonwood because I thought the issue was more serious. That was my contact with Vvhc. And as soon as I learned about it and the people they were helping, I wanted to serve on the board and stay active and really honor a message my father gave of, if life was good to you, try to give back. So I've been on the board ever since.
That's great, Peter. So that was back when Raina Avalon was the director, is that right?
Yes, I was early on. Raina Avalon did a newsletter in which she would feature the homeless. Mm-hmm. And we had the wine auction. I had mentioned my background, and the comment with Raina and Naomi Barkanek was, you might be able to help. Yeah, and and I'm sitting at my kitchen counter reading that newsletter about a kid who was raised by his father and stepmother in a tent till he was around 11, when both of them got jail time, and his biological mother was coming out of jail at the same time. And I read this story and thought, man, life deals tough hands to some people. And that's when I really got very serious and said, I want to be on the board. I want to work on the board. I want to take what I can add for this. Mm-hmm. So that's the history of how I came to be involved.
That's great. Well, we are so lucky to have you too on the board. You've been a driving force for us, and we appreciate that.
Yeah. But one role I've played is to focus on money, because you can apply for money whether you're with your grandkids in Canada or down in Arizona, because it's all you're doing it all on a screen. Mm-hmm. So I've been a prime driver for trying to raise funds for Vvhc.
Mm-hmm. Well, for just a couple minutes, let's talk about some of your early efforts in fundraising for Vvhc, because obviously the bulk of what we're going to be discussing here today is the large grant that we're applying for. But let's go in and just a little bit of detail on some of those earlier efforts that you've committed yourself to.
There's really, you can think of three sources, and I'll just comment first that all nonprofits end up living year to year. Wish we could get a longer term grant, but it just doesn't happen. Three sources: donations from local people, and those fall into two groups, large and small. So small from a broad range of people. And Verde Valley has some well-known wealthy people that have been very generous. So that's one source, just local donations, very important. The second is foundations. Arizona Community Foundation, which has a fund for Yavapai County, for instance, Bank of America. Many financial institutions have a foundation tied to local giving. Walmart, and that's a tough slog. My joke is always, it's $1 a word, because you write and write and write and write, and then you hold your breath and hope that you get some. And foundations always struggle. Should they spread the butter thinly over a big piece of bread, or give a big pat of butter to a single end use? And I know one year it was spreading the butter thin. So we really struggled to raise money from foundations. Very much thankful for what we get. The third source of money is essentially government contracts, and we've benefited from this with federal funds. So one grant from a federal entity and two grants from the state, which are channeling federal money, and that is the big ticket. The larger things that we do really depend on that kind of support. So there's a base level of activity that we can finance with local donations and financing, and that the daytime drop-in center, for instance, we can do that. But if we're going to run an overnight shelter, we really need to go to the third source, which is the contracts. Mm-hmm.
All right, very good. let's go ahead and take a quick break here, Peter, and then when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about the two main grants that one that we've already received, and then the other one that we're in the process of receiving at this point. So don't go anywhere. Stick around just 1 minute, quick break, and we'll pick up the conversation. Thanks.
Happy to do so.
This is Bruce Morrow, Transportation Manager for Cottonwood Area Transit. Remember, we cover the entire Verde Valley and Sedona. Cottonwood Area Transit has you covered wherever you want to ride in the Verde Valley, all day, every day. Take Cottonwood Area Transit through Clarkdale, Verde Village, and from 26 locations in Cottonwood. With Verde Links, it's a quick and easy trip to Sedona every day. Don't forget our connectors to Camp Verde. Visit cottonwoodaz.gov for Cottonwood Area Transit and take a seat. Let's go ride.
There are people who struggle with addiction and homelessness. Sometimes it may feel like there is nothing we can do to help.
But there is. You can make a tax-deductible donation and help those in need transition away from homelessness.
When you give someone a handout, you could actually be supporting an addiction.
A better life starts with better health, especially for those living in the streets.
Support solutions, not addictions. You can make a difference. Visit cottonwoodcares.org.
Hello, welcome back to Inside Cottonwood. I'm your host today, Mayor Tim Elinski. With me virtually is Peter Flynn. He's the board chair of the Verde Valley Homeless Coalition. He's taken time out of his day to tell us a little bit about some of the exciting opportunities that are coming up for the coalition. On the first part of the show, we got to know Peter a little bit. He's a snowbird, as he confessed, but we don't hold that against him. He got the Red Rock fever, moved out here with his wife about 10 years back, and he got involved with the Homeless Coalition by wanting to, he read the newsletter that former director Raina Avalon had put out and was touched and moved by some of the stories in there and decided he wanted to get involved. And he's been, like I mentioned earlier, a driving force ever since. Certainly has kicked our game into high gear here recently with some of the grants that he's applied for. And Peter, if you don't mind, let's get into the meat of the matter here. Talk a little bit about this first grant that we received, and then talk more about the larger COVID CARES grant that we're going to hopefully receive here.
Yeah. Tim, let me just back up slightly and just correct one thing from earlier, or add to one thing from earlier. When I talked about local donations, it's not just money. We distribute clothing, food, tents, etc., and the community has been wonderful with what we call in-kind donations. And the other big one is volunteers. We really are a volunteer-based entity. Volunteers at the daytime drop-in center, volunteers over on the overnight shift from 6 to 10 o'clock at night. So the level of support we have from the community is not just dollars. Anyway, on to the grants. We have operated a daytime drop-in center from 1 to 5 p.m., which lets us know the homeless and help them get access to services, especially healthcare. But where we can help a candidate escape homelessness through helping them find employment or housing, we do that. That's the daytime drop-in center. We have operated under the terms of a conditional use permit from the city. We have been operating a overnight shelter on cold nights that are forecast to be 35 or colder. And that's about 50 nights a year. And we wanted to open that up, and the state wanted us to open that up for year-round operation. So we just recently received a $193,000 grant from the Arizona Department of Economic Security that will let us operate the shelter overnight. This involves more staffing expenses. We serve an evening meal when we're open overnight. So $193,000. We must install a sprinkler system to do that. That's the first step, and getting contractors to do anything in the Verde Valley right now is very difficult. So we've begged, cajoled, we have the contracts lined up, and it's just getting the crew on site. And as soon as we do that, we will be open for a 20-bed emergency overnight shelter. And that's a big deal. It's a big deal on cold nights. The daytime drop-in center is a big deal for getting people to services, but it's also a safe place to be out of the summer temperatures.
Now, Peter, is this grant going to expire at some point, or is there an opportunity to apply year after year for this grant?
We will apply year after year. This is operating funds, and we will have to apply year after year. And again, this is the issue that all nonprofits face: is you live year to year, and you hope you can keep doing that. No, this is operating funds that'll take us through the winter. But a big step for us. I'll also just comment that both the daytime center and the overnight shelter it's absolutely good for the homeless, but it's good for Cottonwood as well. For those that have been by our center, our services are offered away from Main Street behind a screened fence. So when the homeless are with us, they're not in a park, they're not on the street panhandling. So we like to think of ourselves as helping this population, but a person in our center is not on the street in a tourism-oriented town. So we think it's a win-win. The second, so I will comment that the first grant, I always like to use the word transformative, moving us to a year-round shelter. But we don't own the building that we're in. And the second grant is capital funds. And we just were very fortunate to get approval from Cottonwood City Council for a grant that flows from federal funds through the state Arizona Department of Housing, but it must flow through the city of Cottonwood to us. And this is capital dollars. It's big money and big impact. So it's $1.745 million. And what will we do with that? The Chenoweth family had a foundation, Friendship Missions, and they owned 2 properties on Main Street. And Ruth Chenoweth organized the food bank from one of those. We are in that building. But the Chenoweth family needed to sell the properties, and we were very concerned that it not be sold out from under us. So we have worked with that family to get a offer to purchase at under the value of the 2 properties. Very generous family. So what we will do is buy the property we now run for services. This is the one that's set back from Main Street, so that the impact on Cottonwood is minimal, and we will continue to operate the daytime shelter and the overnight shelter in there. We're going to do a minor renovation. We're going to add a bathroom in that area, and possibly put in 4 more beds to go to 24 beds. But we're going to buy the property next door to us as well, 660 North Main Street, which has an old home on it that's not used. It has a good quality manufactured home equipped with sprinklers, and we want to use that manufactured home for transitional housing and build a 6-bedroom transitional housing complex as well. And what is transitional housing? If you're homeless and you get a job, you cannot immediately move into permanent housing. There's a shortage of it in Cottonwood, but beyond that, even if there were not, you've got first month's rent, supplies, money to hook up power and gas. So you need a place where you can go to sleep, get a shower, cook a meal, go to your job, And that's what transitional housing is. It is rental property. It's not a halfway house. It's rental property where we keep a portion of the rent in reserve and give it back to the person when they move out. In a perfect world, you would be in transitional housing 3 to 6 months. We give you back a portion of the rent. You're into permanent housing and on you go. In the current housing shortage in the Verde Valley, not so sure. 660 North Main Street is a large property. It runs up a bit of a hill. We're going to do our stuff tucked to the east side of that, which leaves a large area on the west side. And we're just beginning to think about making that available to a developer for low income or seniors housing. I'm not thinking Verde Valley would do that, but we've got a piece of land and you can strike a deal because it's just a perfect location to help deal with that. So transitional housing, you have your own bedroom, but you share a bath and kitchen. And ideally, we might get some housing to the west of that. So again, I think good for Cottonwood.
Peter, when you ran the housing program up in Alberta, was that the model that you used as well up there for transitional housing? Was to hold aside?
No, it's a great question, and it was not. So Edmonton, Alberta is the metropolitan area is 1 million people. And housing for the needy, there's a spectrum of housing for the needy ranging from one night to affordable rental housing that's tied to a percentage of income. And my particular role there was at the upper tier of that for the low income housing. So I was not involved, the entity I was with was not involved at the lower end of that. It's a big enough metropolitan area. There were people that are dealing with overnight shelter, people that are dealing with the first move out of overnight shelter. We were at the upper end of that.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, listen, Peter, we got to take one more quick break for just 1 minute, and then when we get back, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the details of this larger grant that we're applying for, and kind of close out the show talking about some of the fundraising opportunities that are coming up too with the coalition. So don't go anywhere. Please come back and join us here in 1 minute.
Okay,
Thanks.
good.
This is Bruce Morrow, Transportation Manager for Cottonwood Area Transit. Remember, we cover the entire Verde Valley and Sedona. Cottonwood Area Transit has you covered wherever you want to ride in the Verde Valley, all day, every day. Take Cottonwood Area Transit through Clarkdale, Verde Village, and from 26 locations in Cottonwood. With Verde Links, it's a quick and easy trip to Sedona every day. Don't forget our connectors to Camp Verde. Visit cottonwoodaz.gov for Cottonwood Area Transit and take a seat. Let's go ride.
There are people who struggle with addiction and homelessness. Sometimes it may feel like there is nothing we can do to help.
But there is. You can make a tax-deductible donation and help those in need transition away from homelessness.
When you give someone a handout, you could actually be supporting an addiction.
A better life starts with better health, especially for those living in the streets.
Support solutions, not addictions. You can make a difference. Visit cottonwoodcares.org.
Well, welcome back to Inside Cottonwood. I'm your host, Mayor Tim Elinski. With me is Peter Flynn. He's with us virtually today, and Peter Flynn is the board chair of the Verde Valley Homeless Coalition here in Cottonwood. And we've been talking about how Peter came to be on the board and how pleased we are that he is on the board, because he's been really just a tremendous force for us and has applied for many grants. He was going into some details on 2 of the bigger grants that we received, one from the Department of Economic Security here in Arizona, and then another larger federal grant. And I think one thing we didn't make clear, Peter, last week we're talking about this, was that this larger grant for $1.7 million, this is just a one-time capital grant that we're applying for. This is really due to COVID relief. It's very unlikely that any of this federal money is becoming available again. This is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So really pleased to see that you picked up on it so quickly. Extremely gratified to the council for unanimously approving the go forward with this. And so we kind of left off discussing what your plans are with it regarding transitional housing. Is there anything more that you wanted to add to that?
Well, first of all, I will say that we've had wonderful help from NACOG, the Northern Arizona Council of Governments, Isabel Rollins, and from Kathy Blodgett in the Arizona Department of Housing. So there's a real push for this. And I think your comment's right. This is capital money, but it is likely one time. So community development block grants, which is the name of the pool of money we're getting, tend to be much lower, but in part in response to COVID, economic stimulus, dealing with the impact of COVID, there is money there. And when you see your rent money on the street, pick it up.
Right. So this property too is right in the heart of the Arts, Culture, and Entertainment District of Cottonwood.
Yes.
It's kind of a newly designated district that we're trying to promote and encourage. And you've got some, I think, great plans to help assist in those efforts, because a lot of people may think of a homeless shelter as not being a suitable use within an Arts, Culture, and Entertainment District. But you've got a plan for that. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, and this again, I think this is good news for Cottonwood. So anybody that drives by 654 North Main Street, there's a building right on the street with parking next to it that we don't use for services. And there's a fence behind it, and our homeless activities are behind the fence. So I don't know the exact dimensions, but we're a good 30 yards or more back. The homeless are back again behind a screened fence. So that building on Main Street would be ideal for a art or culture or entertainment type use. I can imagine winemaking, wine sales, a brew pub, artist gallery, any of that. And we would absolutely lease that building to help with that. Mm-hmm. If you go one step west to 660 North Main Street, there is a single family house. And it's not going to be good for transitional housing. It's only got 2 bedrooms. The money we would spend on it, you just don't get enough back for it. But again, it would be perfect as an artist place. I could envision painters selling pictures, etc., a gallery or whatever. And again, we would make that available. Mm-hmm. So our activities are set back from Main Street, and our idea is that we would support Cottonwood with what is close to Main Street. Mm-hmm. Particularly the building at 654 is it's ideal for that kind of use.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And like you said earlier too, when the homeless are in our facility, then they're off the street, and that's really important as we continue to promote tourism in the Old Town district.
Yeah, so it helps tourism. They are in a safe place, and Cottonwood, they are away from the impact on Cottonwood.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, Peter, we just have a few minutes left here, but I wanted to close out the show talking about some of the other opportunities that the coalition has in raising funds. Of course, we talked about grants and private donations and all this, but also fundraising has been a big part of how we get money to support the services that we provide. Unfortunately, last year due to COVID, we had to cancel our fundraiser, but we've got one scheduled again for this year. And if you want to just give a little bit of information about that, I think that'd be great.
October 9th, dinner. A wonderful MC whose first name is Tim, and an auction, possibly a dance. I haven't seen the details yet, but I like to bill this as the social event of the year. Be there or be square, October 9th. So I hope people will mark their calendars. We will have good things to auction off. It's a known fact that wallets or purses full of money contribute to back problems, and we're going to help by taking that money out and giving you something to carry home from an auction.
That's great.
And this is a big deal for us. And on a serious note, that amount of money that we raise is a major part of our overall fundraising. So again, cash donations, donations in kind, clothing, food, dry food, canned food, volunteer efforts. But if people can join our fundraiser, it would be a huge help for the homeless.
Good, very good. And it's just plain fun. A couple of years ago when we did it, it was just plain fun. Yeah, we had good music and we did dance. I learned how to do some kind of a dance, which I've since forgotten, but I'll pick it up again this year. All right. Well, Mr. Flynn, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much. On behalf of the board, too, thanks for your service. On behalf of Cottonwood, thanks for all you've done for us here. And thanks for taking the time out today. And we wish you well.
Happy to do so, Tim. We have a strong board, all contributors, good people, and happy to help Cottonwood.
Great. Well, thank you. All right, this has been Inside Cottonwood. Again, I'm your host, Mayor Tim Elinski. With me was Peter Flynn, the board chair of the Homeless Coalition, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Take care.